My boyfriend's first love was having her birthday by the seaside. While playing around, the first love proposed that she wanted to go into the sea to shoot a video. In my previous life, my boyfriend gave up this activity under my persuasion. However, that night the wind and waves grew stronger. Except for my boyfriend and me. Everyone else was swept away by the waves and disappeared without a trace. Later, we got married. But when I was 7 months pregnant, my boyfriend dragged me into the sea, held me down tightly, and drowned me alive. Before I died, I heard the hatred in his tone. If it weren't for you stopping me from going into the sea, I surely could have saved Giselle. She already had my child in her belly at that time. It turned out that his relationship with his first love had long been impure. It turned out that he had blamed the death of his first love on me. So in this life, when I saw the sign that said danger, no entry, I didn't stop him again. I watched him and Giselle walk hand in hand into the sea, and took out my phone with a smile. Keep looking back as you walk. I'll record a beautiful video for you as a souvenir. To commemorate the last scene before your death. My birthday wish is that everyone can accompany me to go into the sea to shoot a video. When Giselle shouted this sentence, the men and women around all cheered and clapped their hands. My boyfriend Xavier beside me was also looking at her tingly. Someone said cautiously, "It's almost dark. Isn't it a bit unsafe to go into the sea now?" But was interrupted by Xavier. So many internet celebrities have posted similar videos before. What's unsafe about it? Today is Giselle's birthday. Everyone should listen to the birthday girl. Giselle excitedly threw herself into his arms. Her cheeks blushing with shyness. "Brother Xavier. I knew you were the nicest to me. You should walk in front with me." Then, let out a low sigh. As if she just noticed that I was there beside them. She quickly withdrew her hands that were wrapped around Xavier's waist and stuck out her tongue. "Sorry. Sister Lyra. I was too excited. Brother Xavier and I grew up together as childhood sweethearts. Just like real siblings. You won't mind, right?" Before I could say anything, Xavier immediately cut in. "Of course not. Lyra isn't that petty girl. Our relationship is so pure. Lyra won't misunderstand. Honey. Right?" Looking at the faces that turned to me one by one, I seem to recall the icy and piercing touch of the seawater when Xavier drowned me in the sea in my previous life. I couldn't help shivering. Seeing this, having fulfilled my obsession, Xavier quickly took off his coat and put it on my shoulders, squeezing out a look of anxiety on his face. "Honey. Are you catching a cold? Do you want to go back to the hotel and lie down for a while? You don't have to participate in the shooting in the sea later." Hearing him say this, the people around all kept sighing with emotion about how careful Xavier was and praised me for being so lucky to find such a considerate boyfriend. But looking at his pretentious face, I just felt extremely disgusted. I lowered my eyebrows to hide the intense hatred in my eyes. After a while, I put on a smiling face. It doesn't matter. Everyone came to celebrate Giselle's birthday. We must make the birthday girl happy. Well, let Giselle and Xavier walk in front. And I'll shoot the video for you. Giselle, who had been looking at us with envy and hatred because we were praised as a model couple, immediately looked smug after hearing my proposal. She directly hooked her arm around Xavier's and the two walked towards the sea. And I picked up the camera on the side and checked it briefly. The video of Giselle's birthday party had indeed been recording all the time. Of course, it also recorded the video of her instigating these people to go into the sea with her. The corner of my mouth curved deeper. I set an instruction on my phone to make a timed call to the lifeguard, then let out a low sigh. Under Giselle's constant urging, I followed them. "Giselle, keep looking back as you walk and smile at the camera." In the viewfinder, Giselle and Xavier were smiling brightly, looking very sweet. And behind them, the sky was dark and the waves were huge and surging. Just like in my previous life, the unexpected storm came. Giselle and Xavier were swept away by the huge waves before they could react. The others who were instigated to go into the sea kept screaming and swimming toward the shore. But because they were too weak, they were constantly pushed further away from the shore. In my previous life, when Xavier and I arrived at the scene, we saw exactly the same tragic situation. That was also today when Giselle proposed to go into the sea to take pictures. I reminded them that this sea area had already been marked as dangerous, and it was better not to try it easily. But they laughed at me for being overcautious and not understanding romance. I didn't have a deep relationship with the others. So naturally I wouldn't care too much about their fates. So I just took my boyfriend Xavier and went back to the hotel. However, I didn't expect that this decision would change my fate from then on. The rainstorm hit. The seawater rose sharply, and everyone was swept away by the waves. Only Xavier and I, who had gone back early, survived. Those who went missing were all Xavier's friends. So when he was extremely sad, I didn't suspect anything. Instead, I patiently stayed by his side and kept comforting him. To soothe his emotions, we got married in a hurry. Soon, I became pregnant. Only then did Xavier's state improve. Later, he took the initiative to say that he would take me back to the beach where it happened to relax, and let those friends who were declared dead know this good news. I didn't suspect anything and thought that this way Xavier could completely let it go. But I didn't expect that. Just when I was mourning in silence on the beach, Xavier suddenly pushed me into the seawater. His palms were like iron tongs, tightly clasping my throat. My eyes were bloodshot. I couldn't breathe smoothly. And I desperately patted his body, begging intermittently, "Xavier, let me go." The child. But I was wrong. Hearing the word child, Xavier's face became even more crazed. His eyes were bloodshot, just like an evil spirit crawling out of hell. "How dare you mention the child? If it weren't for you stopping me from going into the sea, I surely could have saved Giselle back. She had my child in her belly." So that's how it was. So this was the reason why Xavier was almost crazy back then. That it was too late for me to be extremely sad or angry. The salty sea water rushed into my nasal cavity, and I was drowned alive by Xavier in the sea. Before I died, I swore with all my strength that if I could do it again, I touched the position of the strangulation marks on my neck and took out the memory card of the camera and hid it well. Fortunately, I had contacted the lifeguard in advance. Although most of the people who went with us unfortunately disappeared in the waves, a small number of people were rescued. The chief culprits, Giselle and Xavier, were among them. Only that unconscious Xavier didn't know yet. Giselle beside him had a pale face, and there was a bright red patch between her legs. And the doctor who received them diagnosed that she would never be able to have children again in her life. Xavier, who wasn't seriously injured, woke up soon. As soon as he opened his eyes, he eagerly looked around. "Giselle? Where is Giselle? Is she okay?" He really seemed to care deeply. I pretended to be sad and told him this unfortunate news. "Xavier, Giselle is okay, but the child in her belly is gone." Xavier was so shocked that his eyes widened, and he kept making hoarse sounds in his throat. "How could the child be gone?" I sneered in my heart. But on my face, I pretended to be astonished. "How did you know there was a child in her belly?" "I only heard about it after I sent her to the hospital." Xavier's still unclear mind completely froze. After stammering for a long time, he finally choked out a sentence. "I also heard her mention it before." I took my time and dropped another bombshell. "Alas. It's really pitiful. This child is gone. And her uterus is also injured. Giselle will never be able to have children again." Xavier's face instantly contorted. And before I even finished speaking, he fell off the bed. "I have to go and see Giselle." I pretended to stop him. "Xavier, you haven't recovered yet. Although Giselle has lost her child, fortunately, having fulfilled she's still alive. Even for Giselle's sake, you should be a bit happier." Xavier stumbled and almost fell to the ground. "Lara, aren't you too cold-blooded? Giselle has lost her child." I pretended to be puzzled. "Yeah. I haven't heard that Giselle was in a relationship. Whose child is this exactly?" Xavier was choked again. Fortunately, having fulfilled the nurse came in at the right time to inform me that the police wanted to ask me about the situation. So Xavier could avoid this topic. But Xavier didn't know that the nurse came to inform me at this time because I asked her to. Xavier, who was tired of dealing with my questions, met Giselle, who had just lost her child. I really wanted to see what kind of trouble they could stir up. Sure enough, I was right. As soon as I walked out of the door, Xavier scrambled to see his first love. As soon as Giselle saw Xavier, she couldn't wait to hug him and cry bitterly. Xavier wiped her tears affectionately. Giselle, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I didn't protect you well. Giselle's eyes were full of tears. No. Brother Xavier. It's not your problem. It's all Lyra's fault. Huh? Me? Outside the monitoring screen, was wrongly blamed like this. I saw that Giselle on the hospital bed had a cold look on her face. The nurse said that it was because she contacted the lifeguard in advance that we could be rescued. However, since she could contact the lifeguard, why didn't she persuade us not to go into the sea? Xavier also nodded thoughtfully. You're right. She just asked me about your child. She must have found something out and deliberately wanted to harm you. It seems that there's a reason why these two crazy people are so in love with each other. Respect and blessings. Giselle gritted her teeth and said angrily. Since she treats us like this, don't blame me for taking action. Brother Xavier. Let's start a live broadcast and accuse her of her behavior. Less than half an hour after Xavier arrived at Giselle's ward, the two of them quickly determined the next course of action. In the newly applied live broadcast room, Giselle had no color on her face and was crying and complaining to the camera. I'm a victim of the 721 maritime disaster. I lost my 3-month-old child in this disaster. Giselle's popularity came at a very timely moment, and the number of people in the live broadcast room quickly exceeded 10,000. Beside her, Xavier hugged her in his arms at the right time and patted her shoulder to comfort her. As a mother who had just lost her child, Giselle's performance was really pitiful. However, there were reasons for so many casualties this time. After crying for a while, Giselle started to smear me. Before she could finish speaking, I sent out that barrage that was bolded, highlighted in red, and pinned to the top by using my money power. Giselle? When on earth did you get pregnant? Why didn't your boyfriend accompany you this time? As soon as these words came out, some netizens who loved to watch the drama keenly sensed that something was wrong. Yeah. Where's your boyfriend? You're pregnant. How could your boyfriend still let you go into the sea? That's so irresponsible. Isn't the one beside you your boyfriend? I think they're giving each other affectionate looks. The comments even directly mention names. They must be acquaintances. Why are you still arguing here? Compared with serious social issues, of course, gossip is more likely to attract the attention of netizens. So, with just one sentence from me, the direction of the barrage began to change. Half of the people were condemning Giselle's boyfriend who had never shown up, and the other half thought that Xavier beside her was her boyfriend. I seized the opportunity to shove back all the slurs that Giselle hadn't yet uttered. Giselle, don't be sad. The most urgent thing now is to quickly inform the father of the child. Tell me who he is. And I'll ask the police to help right now. This isn't something you should bear alone. Honey, please help me persuade Giselle more. Thank you. My successive remarks not only stunned Giselle, but also left the netizens in the live stream dumbfounded. So, is the person who sent this barrage also involved? Or is she the girlfriend of the man beside her? I found it. I found the official report. Look at this video. The one who just sent the comment is Miss Lyra, who asked the lifeguard for help. If it weren't for her, I'm afraid everyone would have died in the 721 accident. Looking at the ring on her hand, it's probably given by this young man. Don't you think so? One is saving people, and the other is dealing with the emotions of the injured. I'm starting to like them as a couple. It's also because she's dealing with the follow-up situation, so she can only interact by commenting here. Miss Lyra is really considerate of the blogger. She's still thinking about finding that irresponsible scumbag even when she's so busy. And Giselle was in no mood to care about how the public opinion was fermenting anymore. In the live broadcast screen, she turned her head to look at Xavier, with tears on her eyelashes, looking pitiful. When we were shooting the video last night, there was nothing on my finger. But when she woke up, there was a wedding ring on my hand out of nowhere. My judgment was correct. The pain of losing her child had made Giselle's mind even duller, and she completely forgot what the top priority was at the moment. She just ignored the netizens' questions and only had eye contact with Xavier as if no one else was around. in the previous life, Xavier had indeed secretly prepared a ring. However, it was a birthday gift for Giselle. After Giselle died, he often got drunk late at night while holding that ring. Finally, Feldley, he used that ring to propose to me. Before drowning me, he yanked the ring off my hand and said viciously, "Why are you wearing Giselle's ring? It's you who ruined our happiness." Only then did I realize that although I paid for it with my card, the owner of this ring had never been me. Since that's the case, in this life, let this expensive ring return to its rightful owner. Xavier was full of shock when he saw my barrage. He couldn't figure out why this ring had ended up on my hand. He could only clumsily wipe away Giselle's tears while coaxing her in a low voice, and at the same time tried to argue brazenly. Yes. Lyra. I was planning to propose to you. It's all because of you that we got into this accident. Giselle. Don't cry. If Lyra hadn't wanted a seaside proposal, how could you have been caught in the waves while trying to help me come up with ideas? Lyra. We have to bear Giselle's medical expenses and the pensions for my buddies. Giselle enjoyed Xavier's gentle words, and a hint of smugness flashed in her eyes. It's okay. Brother Xavier. It's not your fault. Am I causing you trouble? Unfortunately, fortunately. Today's netizens are a combination of experts at seeing through people's true natures and Sherlock Holmes. Coupled with the fact that the online trolls I hired were subtly guiding the comments in the comment section. And I was regarded as a female superhero who had saved many lives in their eyes. So, the comment section was instantly flooded. You were going to propose to Lyra. It wasn't Lyra who wanted to propose to you. How can you blame her? I knew something was fishy. So, they're a scumbag and a slut. And he's still wiping her tears. Yuck. Could this child be his? Miss Lyra. Run. This man is not only cheating but also wants you to pay. He even wants you to pay for the mistress's medical expenses. How disgusting. Seeing the continuous stream of slander in the barrage, Xavier immediately panicked. But Giselle was looking at him with shining eyes. So he could only continue to argue stubbornly. If Lyra hadn't said she liked a seaside wedding, I wouldn't have gone into the sea with Giselle and the others. And we wouldn't have lost so many friends. Because of her, Giselle can never be a mother again. Do you all know that? Giselle bit her lower lip. Her eyes reddened. And she sobbed as she replied. Sorry. Sister Lyra. I'm just too sad. My boyfriend can't come back from abroad. Brother Xavier and I are childhood sweethearts. So Brother Xavier came to take care of me. Don't be angry. Sister. I'll ask Brother Xavier to go back. Okay? Their acting skills were truly amazing to me. There were also some people in the barrage who were deceived by such excellent acting skills and became fence-sitters. Anyway, it was Lyra who had the intention to go to the seaside. So how can you just make her disappear from the blame? That's right. Be a little less malicious towards a mother who just lost her child. And another group of people were persuading me to break up quickly and were certain that there was something wrong with the two of them. Just as the barrage was full of arguments, I pushed open the door of Giselle's ward. Before I could say anything, Xavier, who was in a difficult situation, started to complain first and accuse me unjustly. Lyra, Anoa. Because of you, Giselle can't have children anymore. I just accompanied her for a while, and it's been misinterpreted like this. Are you worthy of Giselle? Are you worthy of me? I smiled sarcastically, folded my arms, and didn't give in at all. If it's Eve, according to your logic, it's because you were going to propose to me in the sea. So I should bear all the responsibilities. Then if it were for celebrating Giselle's birthday, why would we have come to the seaside? The barrage quickly caught the key point of the problem. What do you mean? You came to the seaside for a birthday. Not for a proposal? I knew there must be something between these two people. Miss Lyra. Run. Such a man isn't worth your liking. Xavier's face visibly darkened. In the past, I had always been nice to him. To the extent that he forgot that I had never been a pushover. He panicked and turned off the live stream. Then pulled my arm and walked outside the ward. Lyra. I just decided to bear their pensions without discussing it with you. I was wrong. Let's go outside and talk. Oh. He's reluctant to part with my money. I sneered and shook off his arm. mocking him. What else haven't you done wrong? Didn't you ask for medical expenses for your first love? Xavier avoided answering and instead tried to blur the focus. Lyra. Look. You're so rich. And they're all my friends. Isn't it good to give them some money for comfort? If it gets out, people will only say that you're magnanimous. And it's also good for our company's reputation. I calmly admired the ring on my hand that Xavier had bought at a high price. This was the first thing I took back. And there would be more to come. You're wrong, Anisba. Xavier. It's my company. Not our company. Besides, no matter how much money I have, it's my own money. Only I can decide whose life it can buy. Xavier. You've really gone too far this time. I'm going to break up with you. Xavier panicked and kept coaxing me. But I turned a deaf ear and left without looking back. After that, Xavier kept sending messages to win me back. And I saw in the surveillance video that every time Xavier did this, Giselle beside him would always have a big fight with him. The wedding ring I showed during the interview finally became a balm beside these two people. No matter how Xavier argued, Giselle wouldn't budge. Brother Xavier. She's the vicious woman who killed your child. Besides, don't you want to be with me? As long as we can get rid of Lyra, we can be together and avenge our child. Soon, whatever lo sigh. Giselle accepted an interview with a media outlet. Before going into the sea, I saw Sister Lyra making a call to the lifeguard there. If she had known that an accident might happen earlier, why didn't she persuade us not to go or call the lifeguard immediately? The media also thoughtfully attached the surveillance video of me making the call. This interview immediately went viral. Many official accounts also joined in to take advantage of the situation, insinuating that I deliberately delayed the rescue time to become an internet celebrity and was the culprit for the deaths of many people. Finally, heading till session. Under Giselle's instigation, a sudden disaster was turned into my personal murder. Even many people believed it firmly. Only a small number of netizens who had watched the live stream firmly supported me in the comments. But they were also covered up by all kinds of abusive comments. Soon, let out a la sorry. Even the sporadic comments speaking up for me disappeared completely. And only abuse of me was left on the internet. I watched the chaos on the internet with a calm heart. Compared to the feeling of being drowned in the previous life, what was this online abuse? What's more, the higher they stand, the harder they'll fall. When the public opinion reached its peak, I took my next step. I hired some online trolls to spread the fact that that sea area was dangerous and off-limits. Some locals came out to prove that the danger level of that sea area was extremely high. And it wasn't listed as a tourist attraction. It was a very niche sea area. Soon, let out a low sorry. These videos became popular. Then came waves of questioning voices. Under my operation, the matter got bigger and bigger. After learning about the danger of that sea area, the families of the victims pointed their fingers at the three of us and questioned the safety issues one after another. And just as I expected, in this life, Xavier and Giselle still chose to make me take the blame. Looking at their live broadcast that had been started, I smeared and switched to my alternate account to enter the live room. Sure enough, those two started their tearful performance again. It was Lyra's idea to go into the sea at that time. I also tried to persuade Lyra, but she said that since it was a rare gathering, we had to do something exciting to celebrate. It was useless no matter how we tried to stop it. Looking at this scene, I couldn't help sighing that it was a pity that these two didn't become actors. And the uninformed netizens were naturally quickly deceived by their acting skills. They quickly started typing on their keyboards to condemn me. How could this person be like this? She indirectly caused people's deaths. Right? Yes. She must give the victims justice. Seeing the barrage of insults flashing by one after another about me, I saw triumphant smiles on the faces of Xavier and Giselle. Unfortunately, having fulfilled my obsession, they wouldn't be able to laugh for long. I gently pressed my finger on the mouse. A video that I had prepared for a long time was sent out. Since I sent it under my real name, some netizens quickly realized that I was the protagonist described by the two in the live broadcast room. However, before they could start abusing me, they noticed something strange. It was just because the content in my video was completely opposite to what they described. In the video, Xavier and Giselle were affectionately holding hands, looking exactly like a couple. They looked at the camera provocatively and said, "If you can't swim, just take pictures on the side. You're such a spoilsport." After that, the two of them beckoned to the others on the shore to go swimming. But among this group of people, there were also quite a few hesitant ones. They looked at the warning sign by the seaside and said, "The warning sign has already said that it's prohibited to go into the sea. Let's not go. Shall we?" Hearing this, Xavier immediately sneered and said sarcastically, "Don't tell me you're scared. Let me make it clear first. People who are spoilsport are not welcome at Giselle's birthday. Those who don't want to come can leave by themselves. Those who are afraid of death don't come either. We won't be responsible." After saying that, Giselle beside him nodded in agreement. She looked at the people in front of her smugly. Everyone was concerned about the identity of the birthday girl. Or maybe they had drunk too much wine and were provoked by the words of the two. There were many fewer hesitant people. Many of them chose to follow these two into the sea. The video ended abruptly here. But it easily overturned the clumsy lies of Xavier and the others. Only then did the netizens realize that they had been used as guns. And the other two were the real culprits, who had caused the deaths of others. So, more and more passers-by rushed into the live broadcast room to start scolding. How shameless. They caused harm themselves but wanted others to take the blame. If she hadn't kept the evidence, we would have been badly harmed by you. I remember that this man and that Lyra are a couple. To think that he would harm his own girlfriend for another woman. TSK. Their relationship is not simple. There were far more people scolding them than those helping them. For a moment, the two in the live broadcast room were stunned on the spot and didn't even think of deleting comments or blocking people. The direction of the barrage reversed too quickly. By the time Xavier and Giselle finally came to their senses, the live broadcast room had completely crashed. They immediately closed the live broadcast in a flustered manner, but no matter how they thought about it, they felt something was wrong. So they opened Weibo. And the first hot search topic was exactly the video that I uploaded while the live broadcast was on. The looks of contempt on their faces towards the warning sign by the sea area were seen by countless netizens. In an instant, this tragic incident was once again pushed to the hot search by public opinion. And the family members of the deceased who had watched the video were naturally furious. They rushed into the hospital one after another, wanting to seek an explanation. Not only that, many just people who couldn't stand the actions of Xavier and the others came to the hospital in groups to scold them. And as a result, many videos of the scene were also crazily spread on the internet. I could easily find out the situation at that time. The corridor of the hospital was in chaos. Whether it was because the security guards deliberately slack and offer there were just too many people coming. They quickly found out Giselle's ward. They knocked on the door impolitely and entered. The two in the ward were already full of horror on their faces. But even at this time, these two were still stubborn. Xavier stuck his neck out and shouted, "It had nothing to do with us in the first place. I did instigate them to go into the sea, but I didn't force them. If they couldn't swim but still followed, weren't they asking for trouble?" And Giselle also snuggled up to him and whispered, "Yeah. I lost my child just to save these people. How can these people's lives be as precious as my child's?" Her voice wasn't loud. But in this narrow ward, everyone could hear it clearly. All of a sudden, everyone was enraged by her words. They no longer cared that the other party was a woman and was still recovering from injuries. They rushed forward to pull and push her. Xavier was startled. By the time he came to his senses, Giselle on the hospital bed had already been punched several times. She was crying in a pitiful and flustered manner. But for some reason, Xavier stopped his action of reaching out to save her. His eyes were full of fear and evasion. He completely ignored the look of asking for help from Giselle, and quietly mixed into the crowd and slipped out of the ward. Fortunately, the security guards who had disappeared for a long time finally appeared. They struggled to push aside the crowd, revealing Giselle, who was on the verge of death. The gauze on her abdomen was seeping blood, and she no longer called for help. It seemed that she had fallen into a coma. But the security guards just took a deep look at the family members who were causing trouble and didn't take any coercive measures. Instead, they walked out of the ward to call the nurses for help. I know that everyone has a sense of pity. Although they were security guards in the hospital. Looking at the person in front of them who had indirectly caused the deaths of several people, they really didn't want to try their best to protect her. Soon, positive too. Giselle was pushed into the operating room again. And the police also took all the people who were causing trouble back to the police station. The originally noisy corridor became quiet again. And Xavier, who had disappeared for a long time, finally reappeared, after escaping from the ward. He was afraid of being beaten too. So he hid in the toilet all the way. He didn't care whether Giselle on the bed was dead or alive at all. He didn't come out slowly until everyone had left. Coincidentally, he ran into the doctor who was looking for the patient's family members. The doctor handed a thick stack of diagnosis reports and payment receipts to Xavier and said, "Are you a relative of Ms. Giselle? Her wound unfortunately split open, and there is a risk of infection. She needs to have a second operation. Please pay the fee quickly. The doctor is still waiting inside." As soon as these words were spoken, Xavier was stunned on the spot. No wonder. After all, when he was with me, he always pretended to be wealthy. But he had secretly asked me to pay the bill for him many times. And after the banquet ended, he accepted others' praise and flattery with peace of mind. In this way, Xavier quickly got lost in it. He forgot his real financial situation. His savings were probably not enough for Giselle's medical expenses for just one time. Xavier grabbed the bill in disbelief and took a closer look. Only then did he realize that it was me who had paid for their operation fee when they first came to the hospital. He had naively thought that he was really capable. However, facing the doctor's urging, no matter how reluctant he was, he could only stick his neck out and say, "Please wait a moment. I'll find a way to pay the fee right away." After saying that, he walked to the side with his mobile phone and dialed my number. I had been waiting for this moment. I picked up the phone as soon as the ringtone rang for a few seconds. Xavier's voice pretending to be sad came from the other end. "Lyra, why did you stop the card? Giselle was just injured by the people causing trouble in the hospital. She's waiting to pay the fee for the operation now." He probably still thought that I was kept in the dark. He thought that just like in the past, he could make me willingly pay for them with just a few sweet words. But looking at the stack of evidence that I had sorted out, I didn't bother to continue acting with them. So I said faintly, "Xavier, we've already broken up. I won't give you a penny anymore." There was silence on the other end of the phone for a while. And soon the voice of disbelief came from the other side. "I didn't agree to break up. Are you going to lead Giselle to die? She's my sister. We're going to be a family in the future." Seeing that he still said such things even now, I couldn't help sneering and said sarcastically, "I've never heard of a sister who sleeps with her brother." Hearing this, Xavier immediately got angry. He immediately retorted, "Lyra, I know you're jealous because I've been taking care of Giselle these days. But we're just brother and sister. How can you say that?" Seeing that he was still being stubborn, I didn't bother to argue with him. I directly sent the sorted files to his email. These days, I hadn't just been busy using public opinion to fight back. Of course, I wouldn't forget the fact that he betrayed me. I would get back everything that these two had done to harm me bit by bit. Xavier on the other end of the phone probably also saw the message I sent and fell silent. And I smiled softly and said, "Have you seen the pregnancy test report? That's good. Not only will I not give you any more money, but I will also get back all the money you spent on Giselle one by one. Wait for the lawyer's letter." After saying that, I hung up the phone unceremoniously. By the way, I blocked all the contact information of these two people. Looking at the messy desk in front of me, I let out a long breath. Fortunately, in this life, I finally didn't give the people who had harmed me any chance to take advantage of me. But I didn't relax. I started to prepare for the lawsuit. In this way, I had a stable period of time. Just when I thought that Xavier and Giselle were going to disappear, I finally got news of them again. However, the next time we met was in the courtroom. It turned out that Xavier, who couldn't afford the medical expenses, finally chose to sell the old house left by his parents. It's a pity that although his house was big, its location was really remote. Plus, it had been in disrepair for a long time, and it was just enough to cover Giselle's operation fee. However, they could no longer afford the series of expenses for subsequent operations and medications. Under the pressure of money, even the two who were on good terms had a conflict. Giselle pointed at Xavier's nose and scolded loudly. "Don't think I don't know. You sneaked away when those people came to make trouble in the ward. It's you who made me like this. You must be responsible." And Xavier, who had been dizzy from a pile of bills these days, became more and more angry when he heard Giselle's accusing words. Finally, heading Giselle by obsession, unable to hold back any longer, he roared furiously, "Isn't it all because you said that extra sentence? If it weren't for you, how could those people have gotten angry?" The two people who had once loved each other so deeply turned against each other in the course of one quarrel after another. In the end, Xavier threw down the bill and walked away with a swagger. He claimed that he would cut off all relations with Giselle, and would no longer be responsible for any of her expenses. However, his troubles were far from over. Before long, Xavier received the first subpoena. And the plaintiffs were precisely the families of those whom had died. It turned out that after being taken to the police station, they recounted the whole process of their causing trouble. Coupled with their good attitude and admitting guilt, they were only fined a little for disturbing public order, and then the matter was hastily concluded. With my anonymous help, these people knew that they should seek revenge through legal means. They contacted lawyers one after another and filed a lawsuit against Xavier. As the chief instigator who coaxed others to go into the sea, Xavier naturally had to compensate the families of the victims with a large sum of money. But now he was penniless. How could he possibly come up with such a huge amount of compensation? Xavier began to beg everyone he knew to borrow money. However, the people around him had long known what kind of person he was and all kept their distance from him. Having no other choice, he could only turn to usury. Only in this way did he avoid the fate of going to prison. Unfortunately, heading fulfilledly, before he could catch his breath, the lawyer's letter I had prepared was also delivered to his hands. In the courtroom, looking at the familiar face in front of him showing a desperate expression towards me, I didn't feel any sadness in my heart. Instead, all I felt was a sense of great satisfaction. It turned out that when you don't love someone, you can be so decisive. I unceremoniously returned the harm he had once inflicted on me back to him. In the end, Xavier could only mortgage his ID card and borrow money again to repay everything he had taken. Since then, he truly disappeared without a trace. I didn't care at all about his ending. On the contrary, I was sincerely happy that I had been given a new lease on life. I took my life 100 times more seriously than in my previous life. And when I heard news about Xavier and Giselle again, it was already a year later. I heard that Giselle regretted it, less than a week after leaving Xavier. She wanted to go to him, but found that the house they used to live in was already empty, and the owner of the house had changed. Xavier had just disappeared like that, and without money, Giselle naturally couldn't continue to stay in the hospital. She had always been supported by Xavier and had no ability to survive on her own. Coupled with the aftereffects of her illness, she could only wander and beg on the street. Before long, her old illness relapsed, and she died miserably on the street. As for Xavier, he seemed to be even worse off. The usurers came to his door to demand repayment. But the only jobs he could find now were odd jobs. And the money he earned wasn't even enough to pay the interest. So, he was thrown abroad by those people. No one knew whether he became a slave or had his organs sold. But all of this had nothing to do with me anymore. I only knew that they had come to a dead end because of the evil they had done. And my future was bright. The end. In the 8th year of marriage, Joanna, my husband's young and beautiful assistant, suddenly claimed that she had a terminal illness and was about to die. However, she had bound herself to a system. As long as she could hold a wedding with my husband, she would survive. I firmly refused. Later, Joanna really died. My husband Gunnar and my son, Little Potato, secretly hated me to the core. They poisoned my tea with a slow-acting poison, causing my organs to fail. Facing me on the verge of death, my husband and my own flesh and blood, my son, finally dropped their pretenses. My husband pointed at me, cursing and spitting with contempt. "Zaid, this is your karma." Back then, As long as you had agreed to let me marry Joanna, she wouldn't have died. You killed Joanna, and you must pay with your blood. My son also glared at me resentfully. It was I who put poison in your tea every day that made you like this. You're now poisoned beyond cure. We won't let you see a doctor. We'll just lock you in the villa and let you suffer the extreme pain and die slowly in torture. The pain from the spreading poison was as intense as that of cancer. They wouldn't let me go out, tied me up, and threw me into the basement, leaving me to fend for myself. In the middle of the night, I bit through the ropes that bound me, crawled to the kitchen, lit the gas, and decided to perish together with my scumbag son. When I opened my eyes again, I had gone back to the time when Joanna came to me, crying and begging for help. 7 Mom, Aunt Joanna is so pitiful. Please let her marry Dad, okay? I was still in shock as I looked at my son Little Potato's innocent face. Then Gunnar's cold voice followed. Zaid, Joanna is still so young, only 22 years old. I just can't bear to see her leave like this. Don't worry. It's just a ceremony. I won't do anything to betray you. My gaze shifted from my son's face to Gunnar, who was speaking. He was sitting with Joanna, protecting her in a protective posture. Joanna's face was as pale as paper, with blood at the corner of her mouth, looking so pitiful that anyone would feel sympathy for her. I clenched my fists, and my nails dug hard into my palms. The pain hit me, and I was certain that I had really come back. I had returned to the time when Gunnar brought Joanna back and asked me to agree to their wedding. Joanna was my husband Gunnar's assistant. She graduated from a prestigious school, was proficient in several foreign languages, and was extremely beautiful. Since she became Gunnar's assistant, I had often heard Gunnar mention her. She was smart and had strong adaptability, and was the most worry-free among all his assistants. Who wouldn't like a smart and talented person? I was busy expanding the company's business in Europe and America and didn't pay much attention to this suddenly emerging female assistant. Until later, the nanny at home kindly reminded me that Joanna had sent Gunnar, who was drunk, home several times and had even stayed overnight at our home. I thought it was a bit too much for a female assistant to stay overnight at her male boss's home, so I reminded Gunnar. Gunnar explained that there was nothing between him and Joanna. He just let Joanna stay because it was too late and he was worried that Joanna might encounter danger on her way back, and she slept in the guest room. Gunnar and I had been together since college. I had accompanied him in his hard work for so many years, and finally helped his company achieve its current status. I thought that with our relationship over the years and considering how hard it was for him to achieve his current position, I believed that he didn't have the guts and wouldn't dare to betray me. So I chose to believe Gunnar. Until later, Joanna stayed overnight at the villa where Gunnar and I lived more and more frequently. Until my own flesh and blood, my son Little Potato, also liked Joanna to the extreme and mentioned her several times every day. The feeling of having an outsider suddenly intrude into our life made me very uncomfortable. When I was about to ask Gunnar to change his assistant, Joanna came to me on her own initiative with her cancer diagnosis report. Joanna wiped her tears and told me that she had a terminal illness and was going to die. Joanna said that she had bound herself to a system, and the system stated that as long as she held a wedding with Gunnar, she could survive, otherwise, she would die. I thought this was absurd and had no basis at all, so I directly refused. I didn't expect that Joanna really died later. And my husband and my own flesh and blood, my son, hated me to death. They joined hands to poison me, determined to avenge Joanna. Thinking of the helplessness, despair, and pain when I died in my previous life, a surge of intense hatred rose in my heart. I stared coldly at Gunnar and Joanna. At that moment, Joanna immediately stood up and staggered towards me, preparing to kneel down. "Madam, I'm really at the end of my rope. Please have mercy and save me. I will always be grateful for your kindness." As she was about to kneel down to beg me, Little Potato and Gunnar both felt distressed at the same time. Little Potato rushed over to support Joanna and angrily shouted at me, "Mom, how can you be so heartless? Aunt Joanna is sick. Why can't you just agree?" Gunnar also quickly walked over with a distressed look to help Little Potato support Joanna. The look in his eyes when he looked at Joanna was full of distress, and his tone was filled with concern. "You're so weak. Don't move around. Don't worry. We've seen your illness. Zaid and I have been married for many years. She's so kind and will definitely agree to your request." Tears glistened in Joanna's eyes. Weak yet stubborn, she still insisted on kneeling down with the support of Little Potato and Gunnar. "Madam, I know my request is too much. It's understandable if you don't want to agree," she said weakly and then spat out a mouthful of blood. In my previous life, Joanna's blood sprayed all over me. That disgusting, sticky, and stinking feeling made me instinctively get up and step aside, and I accidentally pushed Joanna. This time, Joanna's blood didn't get on me at all but sprayed all over Gunnar's face and head. Little Potato wasn't spared either. Both Gunnar and Little Potato were stunned by this large mouthful of blood. Gunnar had always been particular about cleanliness. One could imagine how disgusted he was when that stinking blood sprayed on his face. He quickly wiped his face. Little Potato, on the other hand, was confused by this sudden situation. While wiping the blood off his face, he shouted at me, "Bad mom. It's all your fault. Aunt Joanna spat blood because you made her angry. Hurry up and agree to Aunt Joanna, or I won't recognize you as my mom." As he said that angrily, he rushed over to punch and kick me. I didn't spoil this ungrateful little brat. I kicked him hard, and he was sent flying. Little Potato fell to the ground with a scream. Gunnar and Joanna were both startled. Ignoring the blood in their act, they both looked at me at the same time. I stared at Gunnar and Joanna without a trace of warmth in my eyes and said word by word, "Since you're so eager to hold a wedding, then I'll agree to your request and help you fulfill it." Hearing that I agreed so readily, the expressions on the three people's faces were different. Little Potato, who had been lying on the ground screaming in pain, stopped crying and excitedly got up to hug Joanna. "Great! Aunt Joanna is saved." There was also a flash of joy in Gunnar's eyes. Only Joanna didn't look too happy. She clearly didn't open her mouth, but I could hear her talking. "What should I do? What about the system now? Why did Zaid agree? Logically speaking, she shouldn't have agreed. Now that she's agreed, how can I continue with my plan?" I didn't expect that I could actually hear Joanna's inner thoughts. Joanna was indeed a manipulator. She tried every means to achieve her goals. Here it might refer to someone who tries to manipulate a situation to achieve certain goals in a sort of game-like scenario. Her task in this game-like context wasn't to hold a wedding with Gunnar at all. Her task was just to make Gunnar and Little Potato's love for her reach 100%. In my previous life, because of my refusal, Gunnar and Little Potato both felt sorry for Joanna and hated me. They gave all their love and care to Joanna. After Joanna successfully got 100% of their love, she also planned a kidnapping case. She was stabbed to death by the kidnappers while trying to save Gunnar and Little Potato. It had to be said that Joanna was an outstanding player in this kind of game. Even her death was unforgettable. Joanna completed her task, got billions of points, faked her death, and left for another world to enjoy life. And I paid the price for her lies and was killed by my heartless husband and son who were always obsessed with her. In my previous life, I underestimated human nature. This kind of thing won't happen again in this life. I, Zaid, have always adhered to the principle of not attacking others unless attacked. I won't let any of these three people off. I'll slowly play with them until they're ruined. Seeing that I didn't refuse as she had planned, although Joanna was unhappy in her heart, she couldn't show it. She thanked me with gratitude. "Thank you, madam, for saving me. I'll always remember your great kindness." I sneered and ignored Joanna, instead looking at Gunnar. "To ensure that your wedding goes smoothly, let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and get divorced first." "You want a divorce? Why?" Gunnar was first stunned and then filled with anger. "I knew you wouldn't agree to save Joanna so easily, Zaid. It's a matter of life and death. Why are you still playing such petty tricks at this time?" Joanna, whose face had been ashen before, immediately showed a happy expression. Looking pitifully at Gunnar while coughing, she explained. "It's all my fault. It's my mistake. Madam, it doesn't matter if you don't agree. There's no need for you to divorce President Gunnar because of me. As she said that, she actually knelt down in front of me with a thud. This kneeling made Gunnar and Little Potato's sympathy burst out instantly. Little Potato, with blood on his face, glared at me angrily. I knew you were bad. You were just pretending before, right? Dad, I don't want this bad woman to be my mom. If she wants a divorce, then just divorce her. Divorce her and marry Aunt Joanna. Then our family of 3 can live happily together. Gunnar also glared at me unhappily. Zaid, are you sure you want a divorce? I'm telling you, once we divorce, I will never remarry you. He really thought too highly of himself. This heartless and disgusting thing. If it weren't for me helping him, could he have achieved his current status? I stared coldly at Gunnar. If we don't divorce, are we going to let Miss Joanna be a mistress? Even for the sake of not letting Miss Joanna be criticized by others, you should divorce me, right? Hearing me say this, Gunnar looked at the pitiful Joanna. Joanna's pitiful appearance made him have a strong desire to protect her, and he quickly made a decision. Divorce is okay, but the son can't stay with you. I have only one child in my family, and Little Potato took my family surname when he was born. It was precisely because of this that I had treated Gunnar doubly well and didn't hesitate to use all my resources to help him and push him to the position of president. Gunnar was initially extremely grateful to me, but now he's become arrogant. He's forgotten what he used to be like. He thinks he can really control everything. I sneered, it's okay for Little Potato to stay with you, but if you want the child, you can't have the property. You leave the house empty-handed. Gunnar hesitated when he heard this. Leaving the house empty-handed was no small matter. He had finally risen from having nothing to becoming a person of high status. If he left the house empty-handed, wouldn't he lose everything? While he was hesitating, Joanna was also talking to the system. What should I do now? Should I just let Gunnar divorce Zaid and then marry him, conquer him, and get all the love from him and Little Potato? Host, you are the smartest host I've ever had. Your choice should be correct. Then I'll make them divorce and marry Gunnar. I'll conquer both the father and the son. You'd better calculate it for me. If I get married to Gunnar and obtain the marriage certificate, you should give me an extra 1 billion points. Okay, host. Come on. I heard the conversation between Joanna and the system clearly. I lowered my eyelids to hide the smile in my eyes. After weighing the pros and cons, Joanna immediately made a decision. She coughed weakly a few times and said firmly, even if I have to leave the house with nothing, so be it. For us, Little Potato is the most important thing. Money is just like floating clouds. Only the love for Little Potato is priceless. Of course, Joanna had a reason for saying such things without any burden. After all, once she succeeded in her conquest and got the points, she could leave and enjoy herself in another world. Whether Little Potato and Gunnar had money and how they would live in the future were not within her consideration. Little Potato was so touched when he heard Joanna say that. I knew Aunt Joanna was the nicest. Unlike this disgusting bad woman who only has money in her heart and has no humanity. He thought that Joanna really liked him, and his favorability towards her immediately rose to 99. Joanna was ecstatic. System. Little Potato's favorability has gone up. It's 99 now. Ah, I'm going to succeed soon. While she was overjoyed, Little Potato hugged Joanna's leg and anxiously urged Gunnar, who was hesitating, Dad, quickly agree to divorce this bad woman. Otherwise, if she goes back on her word, Aunt Joanna will be in danger. Gunnar didn't agree quickly. After all, he was a businessman who was only interested in profit. He was very clear about how much impact it would have on him to leave the house with nothing. He couldn't bear to part with the young and beautiful Joanna, but he also didn't want to give up his huge fortune. Little Potato took Gunnar's hand and shook it, urging him and giving him an assist. Gunnar looked at Little Potato, then at me, and then at the young, beautiful, and pitiful female assistant. Finally, he made a decision. Zaid, I can agree to your divorce request, but I also have a condition. After signing the divorce papers, if you go back on your word and want your son, you must exchange him with the company. Of course. I nodded. Gunnar thought he had me in his grasp. No mother would not love her own child. He thought that as long as he had little Potato in his hands, he would always have a way out no matter what. I didn't give Gunnar any chance to go back on his word and called a lawyer over. The lawyer prepared the agreement for leaving the house with nothing properly. Gunnar specifically asked the lawyer to add the requirement he proposed as a safeguard. After signing, I urged Gunnar to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to register first. There is a 30-day cooling-off period for divorce, and I had plenty of time. I've been in the business world for such a long time. I've never been on guard against my family, but I know how to deal with my enemies. To deal with enemies, you shouldn't try to kill them with one blow, but should cut them slowly like using a dull knife. I wouldn't do anything to Gunnar before getting the divorce certificate. I wanted to give him the illusion that I loved him deeply. I didn't drive Gunnar and little Potato out of the wedding house. Instead, I moved out of it myself. I didn't stop Gunnar from using his cards and let him continue to use them. Gunnar really loved Joanna. After I moved out, he immediately took Joanna to the most expensive restaurant to have a meal to celebrate. He also used his card to buy a $1 million bag for Joanna. I didn't react to his actions at all, and Gunnar started to become bolder. He thought that I was so deeply in love with him that I acquiesced in all of this happening. After Gunnar was sure that I wouldn't do anything to him, he became even bolder. He blatantly brought Joanna back to live there. To give Joanna a grand, decent, and glorious wedding, Gunnar began to prepare for his wedding with Joanna wholeheartedly. Gunnar thought that since he had money now, he should give Joanna the best of everything. The wedding dress, diamond ring, including the wedding planning, all had to be the most expensive and the best. Even the roses on the wedding day were flown back from abroad. He also made a big fuss and sent wedding invitations to all the presidents and bosses he had dealt with before. I turned a blind eye to all of this. When Gunnar saw that I didn't stop him, he even sent me a wedding invitation. I gladly accepted the invitation and reminded Gunnar by the way not to forget to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get the divorce certificate 3 days later. Gunnar probably enjoyed this kind of life very much. Having money to spend and being able to embrace beautiful women on both sides was the most pleasant thing in life. He even tentatively asked me, "Zaid, if you change your mind, we don't have to divorce." No. To prevent Miss Joanna from being criticized, we'd better go and get divorced immediately. It's better for Miss Joanna. On the day of getting the divorce certificate, I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau with my lawyer and bodyguards to get divorced. Gunnar went there with Joanna and little Potato. Joanna's complexion had recovered a lot. Her dress and appearance were all exquisite and luxurious, and she looked even more beautiful than before. My eyes fell on the huge diamond ring on Joanna's finger. It was a ring symbolizing loving only one person in a lifetime, a full 10 carats. It was said that it was the wedding ring Gunnar customized for Joanna. Joanna actually wore the wedding ring in advance. Needless to say, she was showing off to me. She indeed had the capital to show off. After all, Gunnar and little Potato were supporting her on both sides, treating her like a precious treasure. I heard her happy conversation with the system. I'm really looking forward to my wedding. I've never worn a custom-made wedding dress worth millions before. It must be magnificent and extremely beautiful then. When I achieve my goal and earn so many points, I won't have to conquer people for many years. When she saw me, Joanna coughed weakly a few times. "I'm sorry, Miss Zaid. When I get better in the future, you and President Gunnar can remarry." She coughed several times before finishing this sentence. I sneered, "No need. You can have it all if you like it. After all, it's only natural to put garbage in the garbage disposal station." I gave Joanna a meaningful look, picked up the pen, and signed quickly. After getting the divorce certificate in my hand, I let out a sigh of relief. Then I turned around to look at Gunnar, Joanna, and the others, and the smile on my face disappeared. "Miss Joanna, Mr. Lin wishes you a happy wedding in advance. But before that, I have some accounts to settle clearly with you." I suddenly stopped smiling and put on a cold face, looking unapproachable, which made Gunnar feel inexplicably guilty. Settle, what accounts? Mr. Lin, do you have a short memory? Then let me remind you that the villa you're living in now belongs to me. All the money you spent before came out of my account. I have a list here. Please take a look. After I finished speaking, the lawyer following me immediately took out a list and handed it to Gunnar. You've spent a total of 100,800,000 yuan of my client's money. Mr. Lin, would you like to pay by check or transfer? Gunnar was completely dumbfounded. His hand was shaking when he took the bill handed to him by the lawyer. What's going on? Mr. Lin, have you forgotten the money you spent so quickly? Then take the list and think about it carefully. By the way, you can check the accounts slowly. There's no hurry. Now there's an urgent matter that requires you to take immediate action. I emphasized my tone and said word by word, please move out of my villa with your wife and son immediately. Gunnar's face was extremely ugly. My sudden change of attitude caught him off guard. You? How could you think of taking back the villa? Why? Why? The villa belongs to me. Isn't it only natural for me to take it back? The smile didn't reach my eyes. Besides the villa, you can't take away any of the marital property. Of course, the most important thing is the money you spent by swiping my card without permission. That's not a small amount. If Mr. Lin, you can't pay it back, you might go to jail. Gunnar couldn't hold his expression anymore. You? Zaid, what do you mean? That money was clearly mine, wasn't it? You should be well aware that you've already left the house with nothing. You've already left the house with nothing, yet you still dare to spend so extravagantly. Mr. Lin, you're really bold. It's not like that. Don't say anything. Let's follow the content of the divorce agreement. I interrupted Gunnar. Except for Mr. Lin yourself and your precious son, you can't take away a single thing from my villa. My eyes fell on the custom-made suit on Gunnar's body. I remember correctly that the suit you're wearing was customized by me. Please take it off. You? What on earth are you up to? I knew you couldn't be indifferent. Zaid, if you think you can control me like this, you're terribly wrong. Gunnar thought I was just angry and trying to control him. He took off his suit and threw it on the ground. Here you are. Well, Mr. Lin is straightforward. In that case, take off your pants too, since they're a set with the suit. You. I ignored Gunnar's anger. I'm magnanimous enough to let you leave without being completely naked and leave you some dignity. The jewelry, watch you're wearing, and the car you came here in all belong to my assets. In that case, I'll take them all back today. Zaid, don't go too far. Gunnar was trembling with anger over there. Do you really want to make our relationship so rigid after all these years? I tell you, I'll never forgive you. I treated his words as farting and gave a look to the bodyguards following me. Several burly bodyguards stepped forward, took the car keys from Gunnar's hand, pulled off the famous watch on his hand, and even took off his pants. After struggling in vain, Gunnar was stripped naked and stood in the hall, gasping for breath with his legs bare. Little Potato and Joanna over there were stunned and stared at me motionlessly. Joanna asked the system, what's wrong with this woman? Doesn't she love Mr. Gunnar and his son very much? What is she doing now? Does she want to take revenge after the divorce? The system replied, I don't know. Host, this is your business. You're asking me, but I can't answer you. I've checked that Mr. Gunnar's current wealth can't pay off my debt of more than 100 million yuan, so I have the right to apply for property preservation first and recover as much as I can. While I was talking, the bodyguards went over and took away the ring on Joanna's finger, the necklace around her neck, and her bag. Gunnar's legs were bare, his face was as pale as paper, and he was so angry that he almost fainted. He angrily took a deep breath and roared at me, trying to bluff, Zaid, you'll regret it. I promise you'll regret it. You're such a vicious woman. I knew you wouldn't be so kind. I tell you, I'll never turn back. I frowned and looked at the bodyguard, and immediately he understood and stepped forward and slapped Gunnar hard on the face twice. The bodyguard didn't hit lightly. Gunnar's face instantly swelled up like a pig's head. The pain finally made him sober up, and he covered his face and didn't dare to say a word. I glanced with a smile at the trophies in the bodyguard's hands. This is just a small part of the things you bought with my money. I remember that Mr. Gunnar also splashed out on a custom-made wedding dress worth millions, and even bought a yacht and a wedding house. Judging by Mr. Gunnar's financial situation and debts, you shouldn't be able to afford these things anymore. The lawyer chimed in beside me. Even at a 20% discount, no one would want these things. Mr. Gunnar is now unable to repay the debt he owes you. Well, for the sake of our time as husband and wife, I'll give you, Mr. Gunnar, 1 day to raise the money. Otherwise, you'll have to go to prison. After dropping these words, I gracefully turned around and walked out. Gunnar came to his senses and subconsciously wanted to chase after me, but was stopped by the bodyguards. It was pouring rain outside. My bodyguard held an umbrella and opened the car door for me. When I got into the car, Gunnar rushed out recklessly, dragging little Potato along. Zaid, you can't do this to me. We have a son. He pushed little Potato to the side of the car. Quick, ask your mother to take back what she said. Little Potato glared at me hatefully and pursed his lips tightly without saying a word. I squinted my eyes and smiled as I looked at him. Soon you, your dear daddy, and your dear mommy Joanna will be sleeping on the streets. Are you happy about that? If your dear mommy Joanna hadn't shown off her jewels and the diamond ring that symbolizes loving only one person in a lifetime to provoke me, I probably wouldn't have done this to you. After all, over 100 million means nothing to me. I smiled as I looked at little Potato and Gunnar. I've always had a bad temper. An eye for an eye is my motto. Since this is what you wanted, I'll help you achieve it. I'll leave you with nothing and make you live on the streets. The heavy rain soaked little Potato's clothes and hair. In the early autumn weather, the rain falling on people was icy cold. Gunnar's coat had been taken off, and he was shivering with cold in his shorts. Looking at Gunnar, who was so wretched and disgusting, I felt extremely satisfied. I deliberately said those words to put all the blame on Joanna, just to make the desperate Gunnar and little Potato hate her. I hadn't done anything before and just let their actions slide. I seemed to be planning to let them off, but Joanna had to court disaster. Joanna chased after us to the Civil Affairs Bureau with the diamond ring that symbolized loving only one person in a lifetime and luxury bags bought by Gunnar with my card, just to provoke me. It was all Joanna's fault. She drove me crazy. Looking at Gunnar, who usually put on airs but was now in such a wretched state, and seeing that there was not a shred of love left in my eyes for him, who I used to love the most. Perhaps realizing the fate that awaited him, little Potato was forced to speak. Mom. Don't call me Mom. Your mom is right behind you. Your whole family must be locked together and live a happy life in poverty. Otherwise, I'll be disappointed. As my words fell, the bodyguard pushed little Potato and Gunnar away. The two of them fell heavily to the ground, covered in mud and looking extremely wretched. The car started, and I saw Joanna rush out to help little Potato and Gunnar. She still looked as gentle and understanding as before. However, at this time, Gunnar, who clearly understood that he had lost his luxurious life, could no longer feel Joanna's tenderness. After all, compared to the tenderness of an insignificant woman, the huge debt he was about to face was like a sword hanging over his head. If it fell, it would make his life a living hell for the rest of his life. The words I left when I left made Gunnar vent all his anger on Joanna. Gunnar pushed Joanna away. It's all your fault. Who asked you to follow? If you hadn't come along, you wouldn't have provoked Zaid, and she wouldn't have gone crazy. Are you satisfied now that things have turned out like this? As Joanna was pushed to the ground, a clear and pleasant notification sound rang out. Favorability decreased by 10%. Favorability decreased by 20%. Through the rain and fog, I saw that Joanna's face was extremely ugly. She must have never dreamed that the favorability would drop. She had always thought that she could enjoy life after the wedding. But this was just the beginning. I wanted to see with my own eyes how Joanna would be completely ruined after failing to complete her plan. I returned to my luxurious villa and took a beautiful pedal bath. I lay on the sofa, eating delicious pastries and listening to the bodyguard's report. Gunnar and Little Potato still didn't fully believe that I could be so heartless. After my bodyguard drove the car away, they took a taxi back to the villa, only to find that all the passwords had been changed. Unable to get in, Gunnar desperately called my phone, but of course, he couldn't get through. I had blocked his number. Outside, the autumn rain was continuous, cold and damp. With nowhere to go, Gunnar and Little Potato had no choice but to follow Joanna back to her apartment. Joanna's apartment wasn't too bad, but compared to my villa with thousands of square meters, a swimming pool, and a garden, it was completely insignificant. Moreover, Gunnar and Little Potato used to have nannies and drivers taking care of their daily life. Now that they were back at Joanna's place, they couldn't enjoy the life of being taken care of at all. Little Potato started making a fuss not long after moving in. The bathroom wasn't spacious enough, and the room was small and cramped. There was no one to help him take a bath, no expensive custom-made clothes that fit him to wear, and no one to prepare delicious pastries for him at any time. It was really uncomfortable. Little Potato couldn't stand it and clamored to come to me. Not only Little Potato couldn't stand it, but Gunnar couldn't either. Going from a simple life to a luxurious one doesn't feel like much, but going from a luxurious life to a simple one is a different story. Gunnar himself couldn't bear the current life either. The key was that what he was most worried about now was the bill from my lawyer. He had nothing after leaving the house empty-handed and now had to bear such a huge debt. Would there be any hope for him in the future? Gunnar was filled with anxiety and anger, and he urgently needed to solve the dilemma he was facing. Joanna gently persuaded and comforted Gunnar's emotions. Gunnar, it's all my fault that you and Little Potato were targeted by Zaid like this. Zaid must be trying to force you to go back by doing this. Why don't you go back and apologize to her and ask her to let you off? After taking a bath and sitting in the not-so-spacious living room wearing ill-fitting clothes, Gunnar felt extremely uncomfortable. The sudden change in life finally brought his rationality back. He liked Joanna's youth, beauty, and thoughtfulness, but he also didn't want to give up the luxurious life of a billionaire. Gunnar agreed with Joanna's words. He thought that all of this was my tactic and that I wanted to force him to come back. After 8 years of marriage, he knew me too well. I had never failed in anything I wanted to do. Gunnar knew that only by bowing his head and admitting his mistake could he avoid being held accountable. He affectionately held Joanna's hand. Zaid is so vicious and shameless. Does she think she can make me bow my head by doing this? No. I won't bow my head. I'm growing to hate her more and more. No matter what she does, I can't forgive her. Joanna was in tears. I know you have me in your heart, but you can't fight against her. Gunnar, take Little Potato and go back. Admit your mistakes properly. I think Zaid will surely forgive you. Gunnar already felt a bit ashamed and found it hard to say that he would leave Joanna and go back to me. Now that Joanna was so understanding and even took the initiative to say it for him, his favorability, which had just dropped, immediately rose by 10 points. He held Joanna's hand affectionately and said, "Joanna, you're so wonderful. You're 1,000 times, 10,000 times better than that vicious and shameless shrew Zaid. There will never be a single place in my heart for that shrew again." Joanna said with a look of being on the verge of crying, "Getting your words makes me have no regrets in this life. Gunnar, take Little Potato and go to Zaid to admit your mistakes and apologize immediately. To make Zaid calm down, we'll cancel our wedding right away." These words were exactly in line with Gunnar's thoughts. He was overjoyed, but on the surface, he put on a look of reluctance. "But if we don't hold the wedding, you'll die. I can't bear to part with you, Joanna." Both of these scoundrels were acting geniuses. Joanna was overjoyed to see the favorability rising rapidly. "I'm willing to sacrifice my life for you. Gunnar, don't say anything else. Hurry up and go to Zaid. Zaid is so ruthless. I'm worried about what she'll do next." Joanna's affectionate performance made Gunnar's favorability increase by another 5 points. Reluctantly, he took Little Potato and bid farewell to Joanna to come to me. Although he had been driven out of the villa and humiliated by my bodyguards like that, Gunnar still didn't believe that I could be so heartless to him. He still thought that I loved him so much that I was putting on this act and that my purpose was to force him to come back obediently. So when Gunnar brought Little Potato to find me, his attitude was still a bit arrogant. He stood at the entrance of my villa and said coldly to the bodyguard who opened the door, "Tell Zaid that I'm here as she wished." The bodyguard didn't show Gunnar any respect. "Who the hell are you? How dare you ask to see our president by name? Go back wherever you came from." Gunnar's face flushed with anger at being rebuked by the bodyguard like this. "You? Do you know who I am? Sure. You're that heartless bastard who owes our president over 100 million. How dare you curse at me? I'm cursing an ungrateful thing like you. It's disgusting just to look at you. Get out. Get out of here right now. If you don't want me to teach you a lesson, get lost as soon as possible." Gunnar never expected that the bodyguard would insult him like this. When he came here, he was full of smug thoughts, thinking that he could make me forgive him just by putting on a little show. The current situation was completely different from what he had expected. He pointed at the bodyguard. "You're looking down on people. I'm warning you. Don't make me angry. Let Zaid come out to see me right now." The Little Potato he was pulling also screeched, "Do you dare to stop me and my dad? Hurry up and tell my mom that my dad and I are here." Gunnar felt more confident seeing Little Potato beside him and also pointed at the bodyguard, saying, "You're just a watchdog for Zaid. Believe it or not, I'll make Zaid fire you later." In response, the bodyguard slapped him hard across the face without mercy. Gunnar's nose started bleeding profusely from the slap, and the sharp pain left him stunned. How was this completely different from what he had imagined? Afraid that the bodyguard would hit him again, he took a few steps back and shouted at the top of his lungs outside, "Zaid! Zaid! Come out! I have something to tell you." I could clearly see what was happening outside through the monitor. I slowly finished the red wine in my glass, then got up leisurely and walked out. Seeing me come out, Gunnar heaved a sigh of relief while covering his bleeding nose. "Zaid, control your people." I sneered, "What are you here for? To pay me back the money? Where's the money?" Seeing that I was completely indifferent and ignored his injury, Gunnar panicked. "Zaid, I know you're angry. I didn't think things through before. I apologize to you. Is an apology enough?" I asked with a sarcastic smile. If an apology worked, then what's the use of the police and the law? My voice was cold, and the look in my eyes when I looked at Gunnar was undisguised disgust. In the 8 years of our marriage, Gunnar had never seen me look at him like this before. He finally didn't dare to arbitrarily think that I was doing all this just to make him come back to me. "Zaid, we were husband and wife, and we have a child. For the sake of the child." "Husband and wife? The child? When you wanted to marry Joanna, why didn't you think about our marriage? When that little brat called Joanna Mom and called me a bad woman, why didn't he think that I was his mother? We didn't. Why, now that you find life is tough and you're at the end of the road with no way out, you want to play the family card. Do you think I'll give a chance to trash like you? I understand if you hate me, but Little Potato is your own flesh and blood. You shouldn't treat him like this. He's so young. This little brat is as heartless as you. A thing that can even abandon his own biological mother. Why should I forgive him and give him a chance?" I looked at Gunnar and sneered, "Didn't you want to pursue your so-called love so much? I'll help you with that, Gunnar. Don't waste your efforts. I won't turn back and pick up trash. Go back wherever you came from. By the way, let me remind you. You don't have much time left. Pay me back the money you owe me as soon as possible, or you'll be in big trouble." After I said this coldly, Gunnar saw that the situation was not good and pushed Little Potato, wanting him to come over to admit his mistake and beg for mercy. Little Potato did as he was told. Crying and shouting "Mom," he rushed towards me. I looked at him coldly with a sneer, and the bodyguard didn't seem to have any intention of stopping him. Just when Little Potato was about to reach me, Gunnar, who had been desperate, saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. However, that glimmer of hope lasted for less than a second. The bodyguard standing beside me promptly stretched out his foot and kicked hard. A heart-rending scream rang out. Gunnar was stunned. He looked at Little Potato, who had been kicked several meters away. Then he looked at me, completely unable to believe that my people would be so ruthless to Little Potato. Little Potato was lying on the ground screaming. He must be in great pain, right? I watched this scene indifferently. In my previous life, this little brat had the most fun adding poison to my tea every day. Compared to Gunnar, I hated this little brat the most. Gunnar was just an outsider, but this little brat was different. He was my own flesh and blood that I carried in my womb for 10 months. When I was pregnant with him, I had morning sickness for over 6 months and couldn't eat anything. When giving birth to him, I had a massive hemorrhage and almost died. I didn't expect him to repay my kindness in raising him, but I never thought that he would poison me. I had been on guard against Gunnar and was always careful, but I had never been on guard against this little brat. So he got the chance to poison me. Although I got my revenge before I died, that deep-rooted hatred made it impossible for me to forgive him. He didn't deserve to be forgiven no matter what. Seeing that the bodyguard didn't show any mercy to Little Potato, Gunnar finally clearly realized that he and Little Potato had no chance with me at all. The reason Gunnar dared to be so arrogant and challenge me about the divorce was that he firmly grasped Little Potato. He knew how much I doted on Little Potato. After all, after I had a massive hemorrhage when giving birth to Little Potato, the doctor said that it was unlikely for me to have another child. Gunnar thought that Little Potato was my weakness. As long as he controlled Little Potato, he would be the winner no matter what. Now seeing that I could be so ruthless even to Little Potato, Gunnar became timid. He knew very well what he had done. Since I could be so cold to my own son, one could imagine what would happen to him as a traitor. Gunnar didn't dare to pester me anymore and left with Little Potato in his arms. After this incident, I knew that he would never dare to have the illusion of making peace with me again. Gunnar had known my temper too well after being with me for 8 years. I had never been soft on my enemies. Cut the weeds and dig up the roots. What awaited him would surely be a very painful result. I knew that Gunnar already regretted it. There were so many beautiful women outside. He could have fun with anyone. As long as he didn't cause trouble, this kind of thing wouldn't have happened. Now it was all over. He was so bewitched by Joanna that he lost everything for her. He definitely couldn't pay back the 100 million. He knew my methods, so he could only wait in prison. Gunnar surely wouldn't give up so easily. He would definitely try harder to find a way out. The first thing he would do was surely to borrow money to pay me back. He could borrow money before, but it was different now. The incident that happened at the Civil Affairs Bureau in the morning had already spread. Everyone knew that he was someone I despised. Who would dare to lend him money? Without money to pay off the debt, all that awaited him was prison. The key point was that this wasn't my goal. I would give Gunnar a big gift next. Didn't Joanna want to increase their favorability? I wanted to see if Gunnar and Little Potato would still protect her like before. Would their favorability towards her still skyrocket like before? When Gunnar found out Joanna's real purpose, his favorability towards her should drop to 0, right? Then it would be time for the good show to begin. Gunnar carried Little Potato back to Joanna's home. When he reached the door, Joanna's voice came from inside. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Please don't hurt me. He paused and looked into the room. Several people were lying sprawled on the floor. Joanna was on her knees with her back to him, her hair being pulled up by someone, and a shiny knife was placed beside her face. The man holding the knife asked coldly, "Tell me, what's your strategy task? Is it really to marry Gunnar?" "No. My strategy task is to increase the favorability. As long as Gunnar and his son's favorability towards me reaches 100%, I'll succeed. It's not necessary to hold a wedding." "Really? What will happen if you succeed in your strategy?" "This body I'm using for the strategy will die, and then I'll return safely to my original world. I'll get a huge sum of money and high points." "So when you were trying to win over Gunnar and his son, did you really like them from the bottom of your heart?" "No. They were just tasks for me. I didn't like them at all. I only approached them for the task. I used items on Gunnar and his son to make them attached to me and have a good impression of me. The man continued to ask coldly, since you've already made Gunnar and his son completely devoted to you, why did you spend money to hire these hooligans to do things for you? What's your purpose? I plan to have them kidnap Gunnar and his son. What's the purpose of doing this? To increase the favorability? Yes. Gunnar and his son's favorability towards me had been stuck at a certain level, and I was in a hurry. There wasn't much time left for me. Joanna spilled the beans and continued, in order to complete the task on time, I wanted to arrange for people to kidnap Gunnar and his son, and then I would show up in time and risk my life to save them. In this way, Gunnar and his son's favorability towards me would surely soar. When the favorability reached 100%, I would then ask the people I hired to tell Gunnar and his son that it was Zaid who instigated the kidnapping, and then I would sacrifice myself to save them. In this way, Gunnar and his son would never forgive Zaid for the rest of their lives, and I would get higher points. After Joanna finished speaking, she heard a voice in her mind. Favorability cleared. Strategy failed. She turned around in shock and saw Gunnar carrying Little Potato standing at the door. You? Why are you back? Gunnar didn't expect to witness such a scene. He had always thought that Joanna's tenderness and love for him were real, but it turned out they were all fake. Joanna didn't like him at all. She just regarded him as a tool. She had even used items on him. Otherwise, how could he have been so deeply trapped in the emotional web woven by Joanna? Gunnar's eyes were red. He couldn't accept being played and fooled like this. He had already fallen into the gentle trap woven by Joanna and even turned against me for her sake. He had sacrificed so much, but it turned out to be just a scam. Gunnar stared at Joanna and said word by word, if I hadn't come back, I wouldn't have seen this show. You lied to me. You shameless liar. After saying that, Gunnar snatched the dagger from the man's hand and stabbed it viciously into Joanna's chest. Joanna let out a shrill scream, and blood spurted out, splashing all over Gunnar's face. He stabbed again and again like a madman. I'll make you lie to me. I'll make you plot against me. Go to hell. Joanna was dead. Gunnar was taken away by the police. Naturally, the punishment for intentional homicide was the death penalty. As for Little Potato, after Gunnar was arrested, he accidentally fell and broke his arms and legs, becoming a disabled person. Of course, I wouldn't bother to take care of him. Instead, I directly sent him to the orphanage. What awaited him would be a lifetime of endless torture and pain.